Hi, all. You made it to the end. Welcome. Today we're going to talk a little bit about pre-production. And if you remember back from the first week, that's kind of the time before features start getting implemented. And the reason I want to talk about it is because pre-production is a time that is particularly useful for designers to work on documentation, right? And so we talked about Word and that. It's a time when pitches are most common. So the things we talked about this week with sharpening your presentation skills, and really it's just a time that it's a time where the most ideas get generated. So going back to talk about brainstorming and things, this happens most often in pre-production. So I wanted to have a short video on this. I'm going to follow it up with a video I recorded last year with a good friend of mine who's a creative director over at Tiburon. It mentions some stuff that's not pertinent to this class. It used to be that we actually did prototyping during this class, but now that's been moved out to other classes. So you'll have to ignore that. It's a little out of date, but the other stuff is really super. And so I'm going to keep this one short and just append that to the end of this video. So the first thing I need to tell you about pre-production is that there's no standard way of doing it, just like there's no standard way of pretty much anything we have in this industry, and that's unfortunate. But it's worth noting because I don't want you to go into the industry and be like, oh well, we were taught that this happens during pre-production, and there's really not a good standard way of doing it. So like if you look at Farmville, which I don't recommend looking at Farmville, but if you look at Farmville, um, sorry, they spent about 6 weeks actually implementing the system. There was no real pre-production. They just launched and then they did a lot of the pre-production stuff as it came up. And that's a way of doing it. Titles that are your AAA console titles will tend to have a pretty rigidly scheduled pre-production where they go through and do these tasks that I'm going to talk about. So you'll see a bunch of different things, but it's important to know that there's a part in the production cycle that is really tailored for these kind of activities. So I talked a little bit earlier at the beginning of the video. I said, this is a time when you're going to pitch your ideas. And so if you're working on something that's original IP, this is the time you're going to be creating pitches to send to publishers, to send to managers, higher ups, and if it's a big company, to really say this is why you need to put money into our group to do this game. If you work on something that's an iterative title, like for a long time I worked at EA Tiburon working on sports games, this then is less pertinent. In reality, you end up pitching features more than you end up pitching games because, you know, Madden 2014 is going to be very similar to Madden 2013, 2012, etc. It's really just a matter of adding a year's worth of features to it and kind of what the focus is and what the kind of marketing focus should be on that. So you're going to work on presentation. And like I said with the iterative stuff, so I worked on NCAA football 2008. And when pre-production starts, we get together in a room and we have this to-do list, right? There's these things we have to do. So I don't know if you're all familiar with football games, but every year the rosters change and the uniforms change and the stadiums change, and you want to reflect the reality of that situation. And so there's these things that you have to do. They're kind of considered A-level tasks. And then there's B-level tasks that are things that you would like to do or that you really consider that you should do. And so you have a list of those things as well. And you're coming up with these brainstorms of features of things things that we want to have. And then you get down to like C-level things, which are nice to have, but we can ship without them. Um, for instance, medical red shirts. It's it's a nuanced rule in the NCAA eligibility criteria, but was never reflected in the video games. And so year after year, some of the hardcore people on the team were like, "We got to have medical red shirts. It's not real if it doesn't have medical red shirts." And every year it kind of got bumped down the list, and then finally one year it made it. It got enough support that this has been on the list for so long, we're going to do it this year. And those kind of decisions generally come during pre-production, where we decide, what kind of game are we going to be making this year. Pre-production is the time for prototyping, and really every phase is the time for prototyping, but especially in pre-production. Because you're not releasing to any external groups, likely, you can create things that have, untextured walls and edge cases that aren't handled and things, just so you can get a feel of what you want to create. And so when you go into things, into like design project and classes like that, you'll have a chance to do prototypes of board games and analog games, and even in Game Design 1. And you'll really be able to kind of put together something fast in order to answer the question, will this be fun? And that's really the main thing that designers need to figure out is will this be fun? And two, is it possible? And you do that by making small versions of the game or small features that you want to test to say, let's look at this and have people from the outside come in and say, is this fun? Artists tend to work on what's called concept images. So instead of having, drawing up the whole world in full detail in a 3D piece of software, they do a lot of like 2D matte paintings, like this one that was from Fable 3. And these things help the artists that actually make the final content uh, inspire them to create things in a similar style, so that everything has a uh, very consistent style. That it doesn't look like 100 different artists made it. It looks like one artist made it, or more helpfully, zero artists made it. That it just exists as a world cohesively. So artists tend to spend their time on concept to try to figure out what is going to be the look and feel of the game from the artistic side. So where designers are doing it with prototypes and saying what is the look and feel of the rules, of the mechanics of the game going to be, artists do it from concept. And also engineers do the prototyping too to make sure that their system ideas are consistent. Writers often do what's called a treatment, but I'm kind of lobbing pitches in with this. At this point, you really need to convince somebody that it's worth spending the money on this game, and unless you're self-funded, that's going to be somebody external. And so writers do what's called a treatment, and that's just either a single episode or part of an episode to kind of give you an idea of what kind of world we're creating in our writing. The reason I put the original Star Trek thing here is when Gene Roddenberry pitched Star Trek. He pitched it as Wagon Train in Space, because there hadn't really been an episodic, sci-fi show of its kind like Star Trek beforehand. But by pitching it as Wagon Train in Space, now Wagon Train was an old Western show, and Gene Roddenberry was an old Western writer, so he had kind of the credentials of that. Wagon Train was we follow this group of settlers as they go west and they get into adventures on the trail. And really, that's kind of the treatment of Star Trek, right? Is that we're following this group out in the wilderness, and they get into adventures on the way, right? It's just a different setting for that. And by letting people that pulled the purse strings know that this is just Wagon Train, but in a different set of clothes, it allows them to relate to something that's actually a pretty radical idea. So a way to pitch and a way to provide a treatment of these things that you're working on is very useful, because at the end of the day, your job is really about persuasion. And so if you can persuade people into your way of thinking, into thinking that something is really an appropriate level of risk or appropriate level of spending, then that's how you're going to get your project off the ground. Producers, you may think producers, oh, they don't have anything to do during pre-production because it's just this free-for-all of brainstorming and everything, which is not true. Producers will get together and be able to create the schedules for these things. We have, if we're asking for this much money and we need this many, this is our feature list that we want to create, well then we need this many engineers and we need this much time. And so if we create a schedule for this, we start to get a feel of, gee, do we have enough money, or do we have, not enough staff on this, or is our scope too large? These are decisions that the producers generally make during pre-production, so that they don't, you don't get 70% into a project and realize that, you spent 70% of your money, but you only have 20% of your features. So good producers will be able to catch that early. So a pre-production team is generally a lot smaller than a production level team, and that allows for consistent ideas to be built. It generally allows for a quicker time to get to consensus, but it's also a lot cheaper than having a whole team of people with 20 different ideas kind of figuring out what's going on. And so often you'll see after pre-production that team ramps up, it's called. And ramping up means that they're going to hire 20 more people to actually create the content. And what happens after that in a lot of studios, and LucasArts is one that's particularly notorious for this, is that they hire people quickly and they fire people quickly. So, they'll hire 100 people for the next Star Wars game, and then when it's done and in testing, then they fire everybody. And so that's something you have to watch out for when you're looking in the industry. Is this a team where everybody stays around cycle after cycle, or is this a thing where you only work until the game ships and then the team is dissolved? So if I had to give you some tips for kind of making the most out of a pre-production, it would condense down into 3 different things. And these aren't really tips necessarily that are specific for pre-production, but really they're tips for being a game designer in general, but they're extra helpful during pre-production. And the first is just to stay small. We are very, we generate ideas. That's what we do as designers, is we come up with original ideas. And we have when there's a blank page in front of us, we want to fill up that blank page. We want to create the system that has 100 different ways to tie into it, and it's going to be on Facebook, and it's going to tie into your mobile phone and your console, and all these things. It's going to be the greatest thing ever. Generally, I counsel against that because it's very easy to go wrong on a big system, right? What's a better way of doing it is like a rubber band ball, where you start small and you put a little rubber band on, it gets a little bigger and more and more and more, and it grows and grows and grows. But in that beginning stage, you have to start with a small, tight core that makes sense. And so during pre-production, I would advise you to try to stay small and really polish that small center, and then you can add stuff on later. Stay flexible. It's so easy to get attached to your ideas, especially because your job is ideas, and so you tend to personally identify with them. And so if an idea ends up starting to not work or the team isn't really into it, you can take it personally. And that's really dangerous to do during pre-production, because pre-production is supposed to be this time where we're bouncing all these different, we have all these different ideas and we're trying to coalesce them into something that the team can all agree on. And if you're not flexible, you're just going to be seen as kind of a roadblock. Alan Wake, when it first started, 5 years before it was released, was an open world kind of GTA sandbox style game. Because they were flexible and understood their limitations and really what they were interested in, which was story, they were able to kind of to mold that into what it ended up finally being, which was a pretty excellent game in my opinion. But all because they were able to stay flexible and because they were able to understand. You may be really attached to an idea, but there's some, you can attach yourself to other ideas. You don't need to hang on to it until your knuckles turn white. And the last one is like the #1 piece of advice I have for all designers, and that's just to kill the ego. Like I said, with just getting attached to your ideas, it's really easy to assign an idea and say that's my idea. You can't say anything bad about it because it's mine, or I'm the great designer here and you're a lowly programmer or an artist or a tester or whatever, and it doesn't really matter what you think, and that's just totally the wrong approach, because great ideas can come from anybody at any time, anywhere, and only if you're able to stand outside of your ego and be able to judge that reasonably will you be able to go forward and succeed in pre-production or in the industry in general. So that's all I have for right now. So your to-do list remains the same: read videos, plan, comment, Pachaksha assignment. If you have any issues with that, you know how to contact me. And after that, folks, you're done. You made it. Unless I tell you otherwise, it was a pleasure having you in the class. I really wish I had the bandwidth to be able to interact with you all more frequently than I do, but that's kind of how it works. There's so many students coming through Full Sail, and Only so much time I have in a day, so that it's kind of unfortunate. But if I was able to talk with you on IM or email or phone or whatever, I appreciate that, and I hope that the class has been something that has been helpful for you. Following this, I am putting that video that I talked about at the beginning with Jason Barnes of EA Tiburon, who's creative director. And he's going to be talking about pre-production and kind of what they do during that. There's a lot of focus on prototyping because, like I said, prototyping used to be a part of this class. It's not anymore. Now it's kind of moved out to a couple different other classes, but the advice is still sound. So thank you very much, and I'll talk to you soon.
Hi everyone, I'm here in Maitland at EA Tiburon, and I'm here with Jason Barnes. He's the creative director. Why don't you tell everyone a little bit about what you've worked on and how you got here?
All right, well thank you, Zach. I'm a creative director here at Electronic Arts in our Tiburon Studios, which is an EA Sports focused studio. And this is my 10th year actually here, and before that I worked at Midway Home Entertainment for 4 years. And really what I've done at EA is worked on almost every football title, from Madden to NFL Street to NCAA. I've worked on every football title we've basically shipped out of here. And I recently worked on our EA Sports MMA fighting game.
Great. So we're talking in our class about the tools that designers use, and we're focusing in week 3 on pre-production and prototyping and things like that. Can you talk a little bit about pre-production and prototyping in Tiburon?
So when I started here, like I said, I've been here 10 years. Prototyping didn't happen all the time. We always had a ship date and we were in a hurry, but it's really evolved as the industry has evolved, and the value that Tiburon and I put into prototyping myself is incredible. The process for us can be anywhere from paper prototyping. You can set things up on paper, you can roll dice, you can see outcomes, you can do anything like that, all the way to having some great tools that allow you to prototype quickly, make changes. And it's really important how prototyping is so important to find the fun. That's the most important thing, is whatever you're working on with prototyping is you want to be able to find that and know that whatever you start working on might not work. Kind of my philosophy or my thought on it, I know I'm not the only one who's ever thought this, is prototyping, as I view it, as kind of like a hypothesis. It's an old scientific method. Like you're trying to prove something. This is going to be fun because of this. Or you might be proving this is not going to be fun because of this. I mean, that's the other part of it. And so really, whenever you're prototyping, the key is to go in with a plan of what you're trying to prove or disprove, learn from that, and be able to quickly do it again. You want to be able to do rapid prototyping.
We talked a little bit about paper prototyping in our class. Can you maybe give an example of how it's used here at Tiburon?
Paper prototyping can go all the way from tuning player ratings. With all the professional athletes we have in Madden and the different games, is you can do player growth. So where's a rookie going to end up? Do some dice rolls and different things like that. All the way to, if we're talking about a new game idea or some part of a game, just really writing it down and getting it down and doing the dice rolls and different things, or just different outcomes, however it feels.
So how do you evaluate those prototypes?
I think that, again, you want to have an audience, whoever you're proving your prototype out to, what you're trying to prove. That's the most important thing. And I think in the past, it's originally a couple designers getting together and getting a feel for it, and then you can only judge it so far yourself. You really need that third-party person. So paper prototyping usually doesn't go all the way out to the public. It usually goes to maybe an executive or some engineers or other people or other designers on other game teams. But other prototyping and other different things that's when you introduce playtesting, where we bring people in from the public and let them play games, before anybody else, and see parts of the games that we're working on that might not make it to a ship product, or will, or it's the start of making something, some feature into a ship project.
So if you are talking to aspiring designers, so what would you tell them? What kind of skills do they need to become good at being prepared for prototyping in the real world?
For all the new designers or people that are getting an education in design, first off, I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
I've been making games for 15 years, and My education was literally, putting quarters into machines that long ago. I feel like I date myself when I say that. There was no education for making game designs or making games or game design. So, what I really tell new designers is there's a couple things that you want to do is be analytical, really observe everything you're looking at, not just video games, but your day-to-day activities, the way anything's designed, from tables to doors to anything, you name it, and really try to think of why someone did that, what was the purpose behind that, and even think what was the prototype, what did that originally look like, how did they end up making this feature? I mean, a coffee maker, think about all the different things that go through so many different stages. So that's really important. And the other thing is, my own kind of design philosophy, and again, I'm not the only one who ever thinks this, but I kind of go with ask questions. Ask every possible question you can think of, from what's an engineer going to ask, what's an artist who's going to work with it going to ask, what's another designer going to ask, and most importantly, what's the user who's going to experience this going to ask?
Yeah, that's great.
And ask those questions, and when you've asked all of them, you'll find out that you've only scratched the surface, and you're going to continue to think and really break down your designs to what you want to get from that prototype and ultimately a feature design by really trying to think it thoroughly through. Now, I will say, as we all know, that you can have the best ideas on paper, but again, until you prototype and get that in the hands of somebody else, it's going to change. The best ideas are great ideas to start from. They're nowhere near where you're going to end up. And know that.
Damian Schubert in his GDC talk said, good ideas never survive contact with the enemy. I always thought that was a great,
very true.
Great observation. So we were talking in our class a little bit about pre-production and kind of the different methods that they have in various studios. Can you talk a little bit about how pre-production works here at Tiburon?
So pre-production at Tiburon, it's been an evolving process since I've been here for the 10 years. From doing a lot of front-loaded design work, from game design documents to technical design documents and all the other documents that come with that, to having it be different stages of pre-production. It depends on what type of part of the cycle you're on. And Tiburon's, I think, a special case compared to most industry studios, because we are shipping Madden every year. We are shipping NCAA football every year. There's that.
How do you think that changes things then?
I think that it changes because you know that what your ship date is. We could have told you the ship date of Madden 2012, 5 years ago, right?
Exactly.
We knew when we were shipping. So that kind of changes your philosophy on pre-production and how valuable pre-production time is. The pre-production time is so important. You work through your prototypes, you work through your concepts, and really get those things worked out and have enough rough estimate of where you're headed. I think it's really valuable, especially with a hard schedule or a known ship date, because you don't want to lose that time.
Yeah.
And again, that comes back to prototyping is where most of pre-production happens, or prototyping in pre-production. That doesn't mean it can't happen later on, but finding your fun fast, finding the features that you're looking for, getting what you want really needs to happen in pre-production. And for me, as a designer, pre-production is kind of my favorite part. I have actually two favorite parts of the design cycle. It's alpha, the start of alpha, and pre-production, because pre-production is where all your great ideas seem possible and they're all coming together and you're excited about them and kind of working out the details. And then alpha is kind of like where they've all come together and you see everything and all the moving parts come together.
Yeah, that's great. So we talk a lot about like the high-level stuff of kind of the purposes of pre-production as a whole. It might be useful to kind of drill down and say, like, what does a designer do during pre-production on a day-to-day basis? Like, what should, an assistant designer that gets hired, what's he going to do day-to-day on the beginning of a project?
Well, as an assistant designer or anybody in design, what you can expect in pre-production is really you're going to be doing a lot of documentation and a lot of design work, a lot of creativity, a lot of research, depending on what game you're working on. So, if you're working on a football game and you might be in a specialized area for part of the design, say you're working on playbooks, that means you're going to be watching a ton of footage. If it's an NFL game, you're going to be watching a ton of NFL footage, trying to get a feel of what teams run what, how they do those things, And really it comes down to, again, being very analytical and breaking it down. That's if you're designing a sport. I mean, that's a very special case also. If you're not designing a sport and you're designing a new IP entirely unrelated to that, that's almost new territory today. I feel like I shouldn't even talk to that.
Yeah, you've been doing sports games for a while.
Yeah.
So, like, what kind of, I mean, outside things do you reference? I mean, we talked a little bit about game film and things like that, but are there books or other resources or things that you think designers should jump into and kind of to prepare them for this kind of?
Yeah, I think there's tons of great reference for designers out in the world. The book I always reference is The Design of Everyday Things. And there's a sequel to that book called Emotional Design. And The Design of Everyday Things really talks about really observing how things are designed and built. And the author really doesn't look at someone's emotional attachment to it at all. In the second one, he kind of takes that into effect, how much emotion and how much someone might love something or be attached to something, even if it's not the most practical use or most practical object. So those are two books I strongly recommend. The other thing with design is you have to realize you need leadership because you're going to be an indirect leader. You might not be managing someone's direct schedule, and you really want everybody on the same page. You want them sharing your vision. You just don't want it to be your vision.
Yeah, that's kind of a misconception a lot of people have that haven't been in the industry, is that designers are kind of autocrats that kind of look down and say, this is how this is going to do it, now I'll make it. And that's not how it is.
It's not even close. I mean, designers are just the beginning of where an idea forms. It's really a team effort that is going to make any feature come to light. Even the best designers out there will tell you that it's really a team effort, from engineers, artists, other designers. That's so important. And the other thing you got to know as a designer is you have so many ideas, so many grand ideas. Only a small fraction of them are going to make them in. So you kind of got to get used to rejection, know that you're going to work hard on something that might not make it somewhere. But again, if you view whatever you're working on as there's a lesson there, what did I learn from this? What can I take from this? That's very important. And the other thing that for Tiburon Studios in particular, where we're only making sports games, I can go play any other type of game, and there's value in those types of games. There's something that someone did, whether it's the user interface or the emotional connection or a storyline. I mean, there's just so many different things in other games besides sports games.
I always recommend to play bad games because bad games teach you so much more than games that work.
That's so. Well, you learn from your mistakes, right?
Exactly. So, and if you can learn from somebody else's mistakes, then you don't have to go through the pain of actually making them.
I think that's so true, and I've told this to other designers. One of the things I've experienced is going back to that being analytical. Is if you really want to enjoy a video game, like say you've been really waiting for the next great game to come out, play it as a consumer. Don't play it as a designer, because you're going to start nitpicking, and then you start thinking, well, why did they make that decision? How come this button does this? How come this stick does this? Whatever it is. So you got to take a step back, and after you played the game as a consumer, then go back in and break it down as a designer and not have as much fun playing it.
But you learn a lot more that way.
You do.
So if you had advice for people that have never been in the industry, just kind of like if you could go back 14 years and say to yourself, that do this to prepare to be a designer that you wish you would have done in the 90s, what would it be?
So if I could go back in time and have an opportunity to get an education like designers are today, I would be stoked. Things I would learn, things I would do differently is, one is you can't substitute experience. I mean, experience is experience. I hate to say that. You just kind of got to go through a few cycles and learn some things. You got to make some mistakes to learn. But what I would do is I would focus on just being able to animate, be able to draw, just not like you're a Disney draw, not like Disney quality artist, but just the idea that being able to convey your message, get your idea out however it is very important. The other thing is just work on leadership and understanding how important it is that you're doing everything you're making is a team effort. And for education, again, anything you can do to get caught up with technology, like C#, anything like that, if you're not doing entire coding, just being able to have that and understand how the engineers are thinking and working and be able to speak their language a little bit is really important. I got mine through experience, usually rough times, the hard way. But I would take advantage of that, learn code, not that you're going to become an engineer or a coder someday, but just so that you can speak their language and understand where they're coming from. And then again, get some basic art skills so that you can really say, in this moment, I want the user to experience this and feel this. And you know, a picture's worth 1,000 words, and it gets your message out so much more.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Jason. I'm sure everybody really enjoyed that. So
no problem,
thanks,
Zach.
And good luck with your next titles.